I changed my mindset to see failure as the greatest resource on the planet. I trained my mind to look at failure as just an experience. I trained my mind to see failure as something positive as opposed to negative.
Welcome to the Going North podcast, where you will be informed, encouraged, and empowered to embrace your dreams and advance in life through authorship. I'm your host, best-selling author of the book Stay the Course and certified leadership trainer, Don Brightman. Be sure to check out the goods and services from every guest, as well as the host himself, yours truly. Now let the fun begin. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today is another one of those days because, my goodness, we got another veteran in the house, baby. Another veteran in the house. It's always great to have a U.S. Army veteran in the building who's not only a U.S. Army veteran, he's a U.S. Army retired colonel, my friends, with over 30 years of experience as an internationally known communicator, coach, mentor, trainer, intuitive counselor, teacher, and inspirational speaker. And to put the cherry on the cupcake, he was also a TV co-host. And this wonderful gentleman right here was also a former university assistant professor whose extensive experience working with the federal government has also had a tremendous background working within city government and community organizations. So let's give it up for the champ himself, the one, the only George Milton. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, Mr. Brightman, it's good to see you, sir. Good to meet you. Doing real well. Thank you for asking.
Yes, indeed. Well, welcome to the danger zone where there's a lot of bad jokes and random tangents of nothing.
Sounds like the Army. So I am well equipped and prepared.
Well, I already know I said it before the call, but just want to say thank you again for your service, especially 30 years of service. My goodness, like that's definitely powerful, man. Like, what really drove you to join the Army and stay in there for so long?
Oh, wow. I tell you, it's as I reflect back now, it's I didn't come from a military family. In fact, I never even wanted to be in the Army. I ran from the Army like a scalded cat. I was an athlete and at high school, and I thought I'd be a professional football player. I had a little talent, but part of the problem with all of that is when I was actually a high school student and going through these programs, there's a lot of failure along the way. Thus, the title of the book, "Failure is Not the Problem, It's the Beginning of Your Success." Right? So, the first memory of failure was 5 years of age. Man, I failed kindergarten, failed the first grade, failed virtually every single grade up until I was a senior in high school. And I almost didn't graduate from high school. I was 1 hour away from graduating from high school, and a counselor came to me and says, "Hey, look, you're not going to graduate on time." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, hold on. What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, you don't have enough credit hours. You're short 1 hour." And, my parents were teenagers when they had me, so they didn't come from neither finished high school, my mom nor my dad. So no formal education there in our background at all. So I was going to be the first high school graduate. So for me, that was a huge deal for them to say that I wasn't going to be able to graduate. And I went to the counselors just repeatedly, pleading my case and says, "Look, you guys have passed me along the way. So they said, 'Look, son, you have no more eligibility. So there's nothing we can do for you. So you'll graduate, you'll have to come back, take a summer class, and, graduate at that point.'" Well, that wouldn't work because, again, my parents had, getting ready to come and celebrate and that sort of stuff. And I had no courage to go and didn't want to go tell them, to be quite honest. Their kid who was going to be the first graduate and, in the family from high school was something in which they were going to lay their hats on. And the counselor repeatedly said no. And after about 3 weeks of going back and forth, the counselor said, "Hey, look, got something figured out here for you. What we're going to do is we're going to reach out to some folks to see if we can get a correspondence course for you." I said, "Well, correspondence, what is that?" I couldn't even spell correspondence at that point, right? So they said, look, it's a self-taught course. You take this information, you go through it, you pass the course. We'll give you that 1 credit hour and you can graduate. Couple of problems with this scenario. The first problem is that it was from a hard science, a topic named botany. Well, first of all, I didn't even know what that was, right? Botany, well, what is that? Well, it's the study of plants. Well, who would want to do that? That's what I asked the counselor, right?
Right.
And she says, well, there are a lot of people out here who'd like to do it, for instance, those who are in the food industry. So I said, okay, hard science, botany, all right, okay, got it. So self-taught, okay, I could probably figure that out. So that was the first issue. The second issue is that it was from Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. So you have a high school student taking hard science from a university who is virtually failing everything, and he's supposed to teach himself this. Well, I took the information, took it home, muddled through it, took the test, turned it in, got a D. Dude, at least I'm consistent, right? Got that D, passed, went off to college, was there for 1.5 years, and guess what happened? Failed out of college. And in fact, by the time it was all said and done, I failed out of 6 colleges and/or universities. That's right, 6.
Wow.
Yeah. So how did I end up in the Army? By failing out of college. I had no other options. So I decided to actually go and try my hat at joining the Army. And I tried initially to join the Air Force and boloed the ASVAB 3 times. 3 times. See that pattern of failure? Kindergarten. Kindergarten, man. High school, college, the military. So couldn't get in the Air Force, wasn't smart enough to do that. So I tried the Army. I took the ASVAB twice. I had to take it twice, and passed it the second time. Ended up in the Army as a private, and that's how that actually worked. And I was at basic training one day and saw this guy, old crusty lieutenant type, and I said I wanted to be an officer. And people were saying you don't have the right pedigree and none of those kinds of things. And man, so it was one of those situations where just over time, I figured out what I needed to do. But in failing, it put me right where I am today. So I ended up failing most of the things within the confines of my life, but it was the failure that propelled me to be where I am today. After people who had said I'd never be an Army officer, didn't have the right pedigree, not only did I go on to graduate from college, I ended up 4 degrees later, 2 master's degrees, 17-hour retarded doctorate. You mentioned the university professor type. And in 2018, I was actually inducted into the Officer Candidate School Hall of Fame. So that's how the Army started, man.
Wow. Okay.
Crazy stuff.
Man, and that just really shows that even though folks should still go to school, still get an education, like school isn't for everybody. Like there's always different paths.
Yes, sir. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. With my children, 3 kiddos, and they have all taken different paths. I mean, my oldest came to me one day when we were in Germany, living there, and said that, and I'd always, train my kids to say, look, you're going to college. That's just kind of the way it works in this family. That's the legacy we've established. And she'd come to me one day and said that she didn't want to go to college. And doing her senior year, I'm like, what? Well, that's not going to happen. And I said, okay, fine. You want to go to college? What are you going to do in life? And she said she wanted to be a special effects makeup artist. And I'm like, what is that? Right? And obviously, I know what it is now. But I brought my kids and myself back to the U.S. when we were living in Germany in 2015, because they graduated in 2016. And during that summer, instead of touring in Europe like we normally would do, I brought them back to L.A. I wanted to go see this school that she was interested in, and it was really phenomenal. And so she ended up going there and graduating there with a master's in special effects makeup. So doing that high-speed stuff. And now, as I mentioned earlier, my son's a 2nd lieutenant in the Army, and then have another who's in college now. But college is it is for some and not necessarily for others. If we look at our industry today, there is a multiplicity of college students within the confines of the framework of our nation, but unfortunately, not enough people who are laborers and who are technicians and folks who are willing to, who have graduated from trade schools. So what we're having to do now is bring folks from outside the nation to be able to do all of the high-speed tech work that we should be able to have within the confines of our trade school. So formal education, i.e. four-year institutions, it's not necessarily the way for most. And our country is suffering a little bit because we don't have those trade schools that was up and rampant when I was actually going through. You had the option of college and/or trade schools, and both were looked upon equally, relevant. And today, but there was a period of time in which formal universities took over the lead, and now we're lacking in a lot of ways in those trade schools and things.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad looking at it because it's like, like it's really the time to really pick up a trade now more than ever because the demand is so high for it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and unfortunately, when we look at this from a failure perspective, right? A lot of people would think that going to a trade school and not a four-year institution, and sometimes a two-year institution, would be considered failure. And it just isn't. It's just a different avenue. What I ended up doing is one of the reasons I ended up becoming so successful is early on in my life, I changed my mindset to see failure as the greatest resource on the planet. I trained my mind to look at failure as just an experience. I trained my mind to see failure as something positive as opposed to negative. What's really interesting to me, I've done a little research on this, and not only have I lived it, but failure really doesn't exist. I know people talk about failure, but failure never even exists until you're taught that failure exists. Isn't that interesting? You take children. When children, and I'm sure that you had some experiences also, when you're younger, right, you believe that you can do most anything.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you try those things and you don't become successful at those things, here's what really is interesting, is that when we're children and we tried certain things and we don't reach that goal or that task, we just move on to something else. We don't think of it as failure. We don't even call it failure until people start teaching us to call it failure. And then all the negative associations with that failure. I mean, that was my life. You'd never be anything. You'd never go anyplace. You'll never do anything. You'll never become what, and, I internalized that and for a number of years was depressed. And so I got to a point, and one of the things that actually transformed that mind in terms of thinking about failure from a positive perspective was my platoon sergeant in basic training, a guy by the name of George Gaither, sergeant first class, George Gaither. And it was after I grew up hunting, fishing, doing all kinds of great outdoor stuff. And I get to a weapons qualification range and boloed, more failure, right? Failed to qualify with my weapon. Wow. I go back to the barracks that night, and Sergeant Gaither said, "Hey, look, Milton, what's going on with you?" And I said, "Hey, Sergeant, I'd failed the range today, didn't qualify, concerned about failing out of basic training." And he says, "Look, here's the way this works. When you fail, failure is not the issue. What is at hand is how you handle the failure. So failure is not the problem. How you deal with those failures, how you respond to those failures." And in fact, I have a phrase, or I guess I'd call it a phrase, or that I come up with, right? And it's simply F plus RR equals S. That's F as in Foxtrot, R as in Romeo, R as in Romeo, S as in success, right? That F stands for failure plus right response equals success. So if you fail something, how you respond determines whether or not you can be successful or not. F plus RR equals S. So if you fail, right response equals success. Very simple, right? But very powerful in a lot of ways. In fact, the book that I wrote the book, and I saw that people were having such a difficult time with this failure issue. I wanted to help them ease their minds into embracing failure as the greatest resource on the planet, so we could actually transform a lot of different things. So in order to be able to do that, not only did I write the book, but in conjunction with the book, I wrote a workbook, and I also wrote a journal. And I released all three of them on the same day, March 7th of this past year. So those are the struggles that a lot of people actually have with failure. But man, I tell you, sir, if people could really understand, and this is what I'm trying to get people to really embrace, is to really understand and to see failure as, merely experiences and not, fatalities, and not the end of their lives, man, they could go on and become great men and women that they would want to be. Because for me, failure, if I was going down a certain path and it didn't work out the way in which I wanted, and failure helped me divert to a different path. So failure allows us to do what? Become better, become stronger, become hopefully wiser, right? And to be able to maybe change our direction in life and become the persons that we were meant to be in the first place.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Gotta love that equation too. Failure plus right response equals
Yeah.
success.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Failure plus right response. I mean, that's easy, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it is really, really important to remember that. And I wrote the book literally. I started off writing the book in such a simplistic way because of my failures. And the first time I remember that failure was at the age of 5.
Mm.
So I wrote it for a pretty bright 5-year-old, and moving forward can actually pick the book up and understand it, right? And there are some other, intricacies in there. It's a little bit more difficult, but you've got parents who could actually read and explain it to them. But also the journal would help. Also the workbook, which actually, accompanies, by chapter, some of the things I'm talking about in the book that actually helps people literally get there. So I want it to be from the standpoint of how the military trains us, right? Pretty much, lockstep, this step, 1, this step 2, this step 3. And if you want to get to step 12, this is where you need to be. So I have in the book a 12-step process that will actually get you to change your mindset from negative to positive regarding failure. That's actually located in the book that people can actually go through.
Yeah. So for those who have a group called Failures Anonymous, you have to pick up this book, 12 Steps, baby. That's right. Let me stop.
Yeah. That's good that you said that, right? Because I initially was going to start with 10, but then I thought about Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's go 12, baby. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's not the same, but it's really the way in which I look at this is therapy, right?
Hmm.
Therapy from the standpoint of literally changing people's mindset. Mr. Brightman, when I talk to people, I ask, a number of questions oftentimes in regards to failure. I did it when I wrote the book. And when I ask, people to explain to me in one word how failure makes them feel, then I've gotten the various responses, but the two that always comes to the top is disappointed and or depressed.
Mm.
Disappointed and or depressed. Look at the depression that we have on the planet today.
Mm.
Failure is one of those topics and issues that create a vast amount of depression within the confines of our culture. And not only our culture, but the world. So goes the US, so goes the rest of the planet, huh?
You could say that.
So yeah. So when I was looking at this and I reflected back on my life, I was tremendously depressed when I failed because when you're taught that failure is no good, failure has no value, nobody's interested in failures. If you ever fail, there's no way to get beyond that. It creates a very, very depressing kind of mindset. And some people delve into areas that they otherwise would not be if they saw failure as merely an experience by which they could learn to get from where they are to where they're supposed to be from a positive perspective.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And brought up a good point, like disappointment and depression, because I feel like that's something that's been going on at an exponential high this year of all years.
Yes,
Because
sir.
it's like, yeah, like with everything's been happening, like with COVID, like some people haven't been able to respond the way some others have. And it's like some have
Mhm.
been taking the responses like, oh, I got this extra free time. Yeah, not wearing the mask and all this stuff. It's a little inconvenience, but hey, I'm still going to get some work done, going to get a book out. And some others are like, oh, woe is me, lost my
Mhm.
business. When
Mhm.
really just changing that mindset and really trying to turn it around for the better.
Yeah, what a great point, right? It's all about perspective, isn't it? It's
Hmm.
interesting that as you were making that well thought out statement, that everything that we do begins with a thought. There's nothing that we do that doesn't begin with a thought. Everything that we do begins with a thought. So in order to be able to get from where we are to where we're supposed to be, we have to have right sort of thinking.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, oftentimes we don't when it comes to failure. And look, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to minimize failure. I mean, failure is a reality in terms of not accomplishing your goals. I'm just saying that even when you don't accomplish your goals, you can still have a positive perspective. So the mindset is incredibly important. See, it's interesting to me that everybody thinks that they're entitled to be successful. Everybody wants to succeed, but no one wants to fail.
It's
Right?
true.
Who
It's
was,
true.
someone said that, yeah, I mean, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, we say in the
Yep.
army. You're going to have to fail if you want to be successful, and you want to go to heaven, you're going to have to die. That's just the way it works. That is a fact of reality. So if that is indeed the case, then one needs to change his or her mind in regards to, the failure process. And it's just really not that difficult if we were to really sit back and take a long look at it. In the book I chronicle, 17 different celebrities, and people like Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, just to name a couple of folks. And it's really interesting to me that if you talk to these people and you read their blogs or books on these personalities, interesting that all of them, number one, failed. Every single one of them, and a lot of them failed multiple times. Look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates dropped out of college. Oprah Winfrey, look at her. What was she? 19 years of age, doing this high speed, show in where was it? DC, I guess it was, and was fired. Yeah, Baltimore, DC. Yeah. And come on. So they said that not only did they fail, but their failures taught them their greatest lessons. They said they learned more through their failures than they did through their successes. And same here. I mean, I got to become a colonel in the Army because I'd failed miserably throughout my life. But along the way, I changed my mindset and my perspective, and it transformed my reality. People say you can be anything on the planet that you want. I don't buy into that. There was a time in which I did, and I don't buy into that because you can't be anything because we all have limitations, right? Mm-hmm. So what I say that if you want to become the person you're meant to be, you have to take an introspective look at what I call your TGSAs, your talents, your gifts, your skills, and your abilities. Those TGSAs, right? If you focus on that, then the opportunity and the chances of becoming, successful are increased. But again, no guarantees. But if you just on a whim, you can pray about it. You can, go get a 4-leaf clover. You can go have your astrological sign read, right? And there's still no guarantees that you're going to become the person that you think you might want to be just by happenstance. You really need to understand who it is you actually are. I had someone ask me, well, what does it take? What's the formula for becoming successful? Well, first of all, there is no formula, number one. But I'll tell you some things that I did and things that I believe in. And, there are 4 different things that I've focused on throughout my life. Is number one, I believe that I could become successful. A lot of people say they believe, but they really don't. They say they believe because they're expected to say that they believe. But do they really believe, right? So I literally believed that I could become successful. Then after I put in the belief system, then I had to really focus, laser-like focus, not just, on the whim. Look at people with, what is it? They say that people's attention spans today is about what? About 8 seconds, man. 8 seconds. How much are you going to learn in 8 seconds? So the belief system is incredibly important, right? Laser-like focus is incredibly important. The third thing is I'm not entitled to it. So I had to do what? Put in the work. Work was important. So you have to believe, you have to focus, you have to work hard. And the 4th thing you have to do is, guess what? You have to fail. And the failure is where you learn your greatest lessons. So even if you believe and you focus and you work hard, if you fail and you learn from those failures and you go back to start over as opposed to allowing it to stop you, you'll eventually get to where it is you're supposed to be. I just honestly believe that. And that's, it's worked for me. That's for sure. And I'm sure it could work for others. I don't consider myself any more special than anybody else.
Yes, indeed. And that's so great. And it's so true. And it's no wonder that you call yourself the failure coach. That's like the first time I've ever heard of that ever in my life. Like, all right, it makes perfect sense because it's like there's all these life coaches and some may call themselves a success coach, but if you're going to have success, you got to have failures. So let's coach you to get those failures out the way so you can manifest that success you desire.
Yes. You're a prophet, dude. Yes. Right. It's really that basic. Life is so, one of the things that we're always taught that life is very, very complex. It really and truly isn't. Life is very, very simple. Life is very basic. We make it complex. It wasn't designed to be so. And unfortunately, we make it so because we think it oftentimes makes us, well, you know, if life is complex and it makes us smarter than anybody. No, it really isn't. I mean, I tell you, most of the places I've been and most of the things I've actually done, when I applied simple principles, they were really, you know, it really propelled me to get, you know, to where I wanted to actually be. It was difficult when I convinced myself that they are complex issues. When I looked at, and I pulled away and looked at it from basic, you know, rudimentary kinds of things, they weren't all that complex at all, even though I had believed that they were. And that's one of the things that failure really, really ingrained in me is that, man, if you fail at something, step back, take a look at it from a rudimentary standpoint. Where did I fail? What did I do wrong? What did I prepare for? And I tell you, when I look at it and I take that approach, a positive approach, as opposed to this doom and gloom, you know, it allowed for me to either get to the point where I accomplish that goal, right? Or I change direction. But I didn't see it as negative any longer. I saw it, failure, as the greatest resource on the planet. That's why, I mean, who was it? Jack Canfield. I went to Jack Canfield. He's the guy that wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And I went to one of his trainings. When was it? The first and only training I've gone to was last October. And I get there, and I was talking to him. And a lot of people in the audience, you know, one of the reasons they go to the seminars, they want to be you know, trainer experts and these kinds of things. And I had that designator. But the other thing is that we all want to learn how to write great books like him. And I walked up to him and he, you know, he said that, well, I hear you want to write a book. So, you know, I'm pretty good at, you know, coming up with titles. So let me hear the title of your book. I said, the title of my book that I'm working on is Failure is Not the Problem. It's the Beginning of Your Success. He says, what? He says, say that again. I said, failure is not the problem. It's the beginning of your success. And I swear to you, he says, that's brilliant. He says, that's a great title for a book. And it's my life, right? I mean, it was at one point the problem, but I recognized that it was not the problem. And I also, along this journey, I realized that those failures is what propelled me to my successes because I responded, L plus R equals S, the right way. The right way. What was it? Chuck Swindoll, the evangelist, said that life is about, what did he say? He said that life is about 90% of, what did he say? Life is about 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond. That's what he said. Life is about 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond. Isn't that a true statement?
It is.
In regards to failure, same way, right? Same. You're going to have failure. You know, I saw this license plate on this vehicle not long ago when I was writing this book. It said, win only. That's what license plate. I'm driving up 95 headed to Richmond here in Virginia, and it said, win only. I immediately thought, there's no such thing as win only. Well, failure is not an option. Failure is absolutely an option. Failure has to be an option because failure is a reality. Success, on the other hand, is not guaranteed. And success may not be an option because if you don't have the right mindset regarding failure, you just may give up and never become as successful as you want. Interesting, huh? So failure is definitely an option, and it has to be because it's a part of our lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
Huge part of our lives right there.
Yeah,
100% of it.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. You know, who was it? I was reading something the other day where Denzel Washington said that, you know what? Faith is good. I mean, dude, if you want to be successful, you need to have faith. He says luck is definitely important. You know, he's been very lucky throughout his career, he said. But he says, even if you are faithful, even if you are lucky, you still have to put in the work. There's no way around that. And oftentimes what failure does, Mr. Brightman, is it forces us to put in the work. It's all good, right? None of us are entitled to much of anything, although oftentimes we believe that we are. So if we're willing to put in that work, and look, I've been blessed, been lucky, whatever you want to call it, you know, God, the universe, you know, different people call, you know, different things different, by different names. But I can tell you this, that though during those dark days of that failure that I've had throughout my life, I blame God a lot because, being a Christian guy, I expect for him to be the Heavenly Father to watch over me, to prevent me from failing, when it was just the opposite. He allowed for me to fail because he knew in those failures I'd find my greatest lessons.
Mhm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So true. And like it's really true. It's like whenever looking back, even in my life, like past times we may have had a loss or a bad moment, that
Yeah.
actually propelled me and charged me for the next opportunity, and actually did better than if I would have won the first time.
Right? Right? You chose to do that. Everything we do, right, comes down to what? A choice.
Hmm.
So you could have easily chosen just the opposite and not be where you are today. So we need to really, really, especially when it comes to our children, we need to start out early on teaching them from a positive perspective that failure is not bad. Fear, in the same way, began just like failure, and that was when someone told them that it exists. Fear is this, an issue of the mind. And people, it's interesting to me, when you study the Bibles and all that kind of stuff. And I was actually a seminary graduate, so I kind of referred as, some of the scriptural references and that kind of thing. But it's interesting to me that even in Scripture, where, God says that He doesn't even give us, the spirit of fear.
Hmm.
So if God doesn't give us the spirit of fear, where does it come from? It comes from man. If God doesn't see failure as bad, where does it come from? It comes from man. It comes, those two issues come from the way in which we're actually taught. Can you imagine how we would transform the planet if we taught at a very early age children that failure is just an experience, and by failing you're going to get better? And I'm not saying, look, let's revel in failure. That's not the point. The point is learn from those failures to change your path, to change your direction, to actually get better at what you're supposed to be at. And the other piece is to teach people that we shouldn't fear. We shouldn't look at fear as something that's bad either. I mean, look, I can tell you from a military perspective, I've been to combat multiple times, not just a deployment. And thank God for those soldiers and sailors, Army, Marines, Coast Guards, who's deployed. But I've been in actual combat 5 times. I've commanded in combat multiple times, and I can tell you that even with all of the training that I received, there was still a certain sense of fear when we went into the combat zone. But that's not the kind of fear that I'm talking about, right? The kind of fear that I'm talking about, the fear of, not moving ahead, not doing the kind of things we were supposed to do. Even though we were fearful, we continued on with the mission, right? We continued to do the kinds of things we were supposed to do, continued on with the jobs, rescue the people we're supposed to rescue, accomplish the goals of the missions that we were supposed to do so. It's not because of the fear, but in spite of the fear. So the fear didn't, debilitate us to the point to where we couldn't function. Oftentimes, we allow for failure to do exactly that. Fear of failure keeps people from becoming all they were meant to be, unfortunately, because they have the negative perspective as opposed to the positive perspective.
There we go. There we go. So it seems like you're like the dean of failures. So is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often about the subject of failure that folks don't think about?
Yeah, if there was one question, I guess, if they really, really were sincere about the failure issue, I would want them to ask me, how can I change my mindset to see failure as positive as opposed to negative? And I would be all over it, brother. Let me tell you. If they asked me that one question and was sincere about it, I would take them under my tutelage, coach, mentor, and train them how to get from where they are to where they're supposed to be regarding their failure. How do I get
Go.
there? That's what I live for now. How do I get there? How do I change my mind? And I really, really would be excited about that, and would go with them on the journey to getting them from where they are to where they could be.
There we go. There we go. And you mentioned seminary school, man. I didn't even know that part of it. So you graduated from seminary, actually,
Yeah.
while you were in service, I
Yes, sir.
imagine.
Yes, sir. Well, no, actually, interesting story behind that. Another failure story. It's I actually want I chronicle this in the book about wanting to become a chaplain actually in the Army, because I was in the Army as an enlisted guy. I went to OCS, got commissioned, and got out of the Army. Went to finish up my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and I'd actually completed the first master's degree in religious education. And I contacted the Army because I had a background in that, and decided I wanted to be an Army chaplain. I contacted the chaplain board, and I said, "What? Absolutely, we'll take you on as a chaplain. Hey, man, you're you're a seminary graduate. You got this Army background. You're perfect, right? You're a minority. Not a whole lot of minorities actually, make it through the school. I mean, yeah, absolutely." So I went to our denomination representatives and said, "Hey, look here, I want to be an Army chaplain." The Army has actually agreed. All I got to do is get you guys to sign on the dotted lines, and you give me the authorization to do so. And the powers that be says, "Well, hold on, not so fast. We will only give you an endorsement to become a chaplain within our denomination if you have a divinity degree." I said, "Wait a minute. I have a master's degree. The Army requires a master's degree and an endorsement from you. So, why won't you endorse me? Because you don't have a divinity degree." Okay, but check this out. I'm in a doctoral program in this institution. So I've completed my master's. I'm working on my doctorate from your institution. The Army says it only requires a master's. Voila. I need an endorsement. I failed to get their endorsement.
Wow.
They wouldn't give me an endorsement. So I ended up, and one of the reasons I wanted to become, one of the reasons I wanted to get a doctorate was so I could become a university professor. I went back to the Army. The Army says, "Okay, I understand. What if we sent you to the Army and made you an ROTC professor?" And I'm like, "What? What'd you say?" "Well, we'd like to actually offer you the opportunity to become an assistant professor of military science within the confines of the Army." After 17 hours, straight A's within the confines of a doctorate at the seminary, I said, "C'est la vie. Thank you so much," and went on without the doctorate to become a university professor. Interesting, isn't it? I failed to become a chaplain, but I became a professor. So that failure turned into what? A success. And one of the goals that I'd always wanted to accomplish and achieve.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I know, right? Right?
A little asinine if you ask me, though. Like, wait a
Yeah,
second.
yeah,
I'm with
yeah,
y'all school. A
yeah,
master's with y'all, and I can't be a
yeah.
chaplain for you. Like, wait a
Right.
second.
Because I haven't met your requirement. Right?
Even though I'm in your program.
Right, right, right.
Over.
Yeah. Yeah, see, and once again, you have an institution, and it's a good institution in a lot of ways, but you have an institution because they're unwilling, right, to support certain endeavors that people actually have, or callings is what they would call it, upon their lives. Man gets in the way, and he fails those people. So one of the principles that I try to apply to my life is don't allow for other people to determine what your failures are. You choose those for yourself. And as you choose those failures, or are not able to accomplish those goals, don't allow for that to keep you or to hold you back from becoming who you're supposed to be. If I tell you, Mr. Ryman, if I could get just half the population within the confines of just one country to understand that and then apply that, we would transform literally the world overnight. So that's literally my goal, to take this message not only nationally, not only from the state perspective, but do it from a worldwide perspective, to go out and transform the world, to teach them that failure is their greatest asset and their greatest resource on the planet to becoming who they were actually meant to be on this planet. Failure can give people purpose if they understood it in the right sort of fashion. But it does just the opposite for a lot of folks. It creates a lot of depression, a lot of dissatisfaction, It causes people to just stop, people to quit, people to do things in which, they otherwise would not do had they not failed. And in my world and in my way of life, boy, I tell you, it's the failures that I get up every day, right? And when I see failure, I address it in others and especially within the confines of myself. So I just look at it, changes my perspective on how I see the world, on how I see people, on how I relate to people, on how I understand and accept and embrace people. So it's done a lot for me, and I want to try to do that for others as well.
That's what I'm talking about right there. Yes, indeed. My man leaving a tennis bracelet of jewels for the folks listening today, baby. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Well, coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in 2020, with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
No matter what people say about failure, no matter what you're going to be told, no matter what you're going to be taught, no matter what your experiences are regarding failure, don't fear it, embrace it, accept it, understand it, and thrive.
There you go. There you go, baby. That's right. Because folks do need to thrive. You can still do it. No matter what the circumstances are, you can still thrive.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. It's who is it? Ariana Huffington. She has this podcast, Thrive Global, I think it's called. I listen to quite often. I have her book that she wrote, Thrive as well, and she has an interesting perspective on that one word and on life in general. And life is very, very short. Life is very, very brief. But I like how she teaches that no matter where you are, no matter what you do, you have the opportunity and the ability to thrive if you change your perspective. Who was it? Bruce Lee said that, no, it wasn't Bruce Lee. I was going to quote something else he had actually said, but it was Seneca who said, life, if lived well, is enough. Life, if lived well, is enough. I change it up a little bit and says, life, if lived well, should be enough. And unfortunately, it tends not to be for a lot of people. And we don't live our lives very well because we look at failure as a problem, as opposed to giving us that drive to be able to thrive, right? I think for me, there's a direct correlation to me being able to thrive based upon the failures of which I've had in my life. So I've taken those failures, thrived and became successful because of, and not merely in spite of.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about right there, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Woo! My man George in the building, baby. That's right. Yes, indeed. The Colonel, baby. The Colonel, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Well, for those who want to keep in magical contact with you and buy some magical copies of your book, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yes, sir. Thank you for asking, Mr. Reitman. Keeping in contact with me, you can go to my website, www.georgeamilton.com. I say again, www.georgeamilton.com. You can actually reach me through email. It's george@georgeamilton.com. I say again, george@georgeamilton.com. And the contact information in regards to my phone is actually on the website, and addresses and these kinds of things, so you can contact me through that way. You can actually get the book, the workbook, and the journal. Failure is not the problem. It's the beginning of your success from Amazon. So 5 different ways to actually get the book. You can buy just a book. You can buy the workbook. You can buy the journal. And there's also an audio version of the book itself. The 5th way is that if you want to save a little money, buy the book and the workbook that's actually combined. So 5 different SKUs in terms of getting those books. I'm in the process of actually coming online, and if you can see Mr. Reitman, I have a little logo here that I have. What was it? Oh man, a little logo story here. I failed to get the first logo and the first phrase that I wanted, and because I failed, and in fact I'd gone out and I applied for a patent. Trademark. To have it registered, phrase and a logo. And the first one failed. See, another failure. So when I was talking to the folks at the patent office, I said, well, how can I get my money back? And they said, well, we don't return your money. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I said, well, you can either just let the money go, or you can come up with another phrase and logo. That's how this phrase here, failure is not the problem, came about. That's how the logo came about. So when I sent off the logo, which is a frowny face, right, encircled by my phrase, failure is not the problem, I sent it off the first time, it was approved. So the logo is approved, and the phrase, failure is not the problem, was approved. So those are actually registered trademarks that only I can use.
There we go. There we go. The chair, baby. That's right. Failure's not the problem. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
indeed. It's definitely the solution. Well, there you have it, folks. Go on out there, buy the main book itself. Heck, buy all 5 copies of the book. Heck, buy 500. So 100 each of each thing if you need to. So that way you can get the ultimate goodness and heck, even gift it to somebody you know is going through a rough time during these times that we're going through that. Some maybe even be the tip of the iceberg, to be honest, depending on what's going on in your neck of the woods. So, any parting words to the folks still listening, Colonel?
Yes, Mr. Bragman. Look, I would just like to say that, look, as you just insinuated here, a lot of craziness going on in the country today, a lot of failure in every aspect, whether it be government, whether it be businesses, whether, folks are losing their jobs, whether schools. I mean, just tons and tons and tons and tons of failure within the confines of leadership. Remember, in the absence of leadership, there will be chaos. And our society right now is very, very chaotic. But as we look at this chaotic situation, right, there's also opportunity. And when you have that opportunity, seize it, carpe diem. And once you seize that opportunity, when you fail, because you will fail, remember there's a lesson to be learned by that. So whether it's our government that's failing us, whether it's businesses that are failing us, whether it's you who are failing yourself through poor choices, there's always a way to get beyond that and lessons to be learned behind that. So, hey, look, thank you for this awesome time. What an honor, sir, it is to actually meet with you and visit with you. I feel the kindred spirit with you, my man. And I really, really appreciate in a very, very humbling way that you've allowed me this time to be able to visit with you and to hopefully get the message out to where if this message only helps one person, sir, just one, we've done our job tonight.
How's it going, my friend? I'm glad you made it to the end. That shows that you really enjoyed what you heard and you are an uncommon finisher. Thanks for giving this show a listen. If you really want to help out the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone that you care about or someone that needs to hear this message because we want to spread this podcast around like butter on bread if that's your type of thing. And if it's not your type of thing, still spread it around anyway because good stuff needs to be shared with good people like yourself.